Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Hames. This is episode 0 of a podcast which I am calling Into AI Safety. In this podcast, we are going to follow my journey into AI safety as a career. So, why am I doing this? I was talking to Peter Gebauer, who's a friend that I met during the AI governance course run by Blue Dot Impact, and we were talking about my experience so far, what opportunities I was pursuing, and what would be beneficial to me right now as a newcomer. One thing that we kept coming back to was this idea of mentorship, and how mentorship is really valuable, but it is costly to do, especially in a small field like AI safety. Peter had the idea that if we could get someone who is already experiencing routine mentorship, we could record that, and that would allow us to maximize the value given by that person's mentors, because we could distribute it to many more people. Although this wouldn't be tailored to the specific individuals listening, it would still be highly valuable because a lot of the advice and the mentorship that you get initially is going to be relatively applicable to a wide variety of situations. This made perfect sense to me, and my initial thought was, great, I'll do it when I have a mentor. But then I realized that I could start contributing to this before I had a mentor. It might be valuable to other people to see how I go about asking for advice and looking for mentors. That brings us to this podcast. Here, I plan on talking about my methods and my thoughts on where I'm at and what I'm doing. Also, I plan to share resources that I have found which have been particularly useful to me. Not just what those resources are, but also why they were helpful, so that if you're listening to this and that resource has been taken down or is no longer useful, you can try to find one that fits the same niche for you. Most importantly, I'll be recording conversations that I have with other peers and mentors so that I can share as much of that advice and that feedback as possible with those of you that are listening. Since this is episode 0, I wanted to give a brief overview of the 3 different projects that I'm working on right now. The first project was started by Dr. Darrell Wright, and is an extension of the paper Engineering Monosemanticity in Toy Models. Through some networking I did in the AI governance course, I was able to connect with him and we started talking about his research and how I might be able to contribute to it. Pretty soon, we were working together directly on the research that he was doing, looking at the results, and combining our ideas into new tests to run and new ways to do things. With regards to this project, I'll be documenting some of my thoughts and how I'm approaching it when I'm working independently, and I'll also be recording conversations that Darrell and I have together, basically providing insight into the process that's going on. Next is the AI Safety Camp research proposal that I'm working on, which is currently titled The Effect of Machine Learning on Bioengineered Pandemic Risk. I decided that because I have some research experience, although it's not in deep learning specifically, I could be of value by being a research lead because it would help other people get into the field with an opportunity that wouldn't have been there otherwise, and I might be able to provide some mentorship, although it wouldn't be the best, it would still be something. So I began writing research proposals, and I say proposals because it took more than one idea to get to the right thing. For this project, we'll go through the process of me getting feedback from other people, of honing that research proposal, and then ideally running that research project as well. Finally, it's a bit meta, but this podcast is technically also a project, and I figure that someone out there could probably benefit from me sharing what I had to go through to get this whole thing started up. So, I'll also have a few episodes regarding what starting this podcast was like for me, things I found difficult, and how I've addressed them. Those are the 3 projects that we're going to start with, and I'm sure that there will be more that come along as we progress into the series. As the last part of this episode, I want to give a little bit more context on how I got here. If you aren't interested in that context, by all means skip the rest of this episode and go to the next one. Or, I guess, wait for the next one to come out if you're listening to this as I release it. We're going to start in May of 2022, when I graduated with a master's in computational modeling from the University of Colorado at Boulder. The initial plan was to work part-time on a startup that had spun out of my senior project from a year before, and also work part-time in healthcare information systems at High Life Recovery, a behavioral health clinic based out of Ohio. Although this wasn't exactly what I had trained to do, I took the job because I thought it would be a good way to have a stable income while also being able to work part-time on the startup. For various reasons, the startup fell through and the healthcare information systems job became more than part-time. So by the end of the summer in August, I was working full-time with High Life Recovery, and the startup was basically done. In December of 2022, I started reflecting on the past half year, and I realized that I didn't want to continue in healthcare information systems as a career, but I had no idea what to do instead. I thought about this a lot, and I started looking for resources online. Quickly, I found 80,000 Hours. 80,000 Hours has a list of the world's most pressing problems, and they provide reasoning as to why these are the most pressing problems. Not only that, they also provide resources as to how to get into these fields, and using the facts and arguments that they present, you can choose what the most important and beneficial paths are for you. This was a really useful tool for me, and I realized that I didn't want to work on anything that wasn't related to X risk. Based on the areas that I care about most and the areas in which I can provide the most value, I decided to focus on climate change and AI technical safety. At this point, I revamped my resume, made a portfolio, spent some time on my LinkedIn profile, and started applying to jobs related to climate change and AI technical safety. Actually, I was applying to AI jobs in general, as there are a lot more of those than AI technical safety jobs, and that would provide me career capital for getting into the technical safety space. After a couple months of applying to these positions, I had gotten a couple of initial interviews, but I hadn't gone past that stage. So I went back to the drawing board and applied for one-on-one career advising with 80,000 Hours. During the conversation that I had, I was provided a significant amount of resources, and I was able to talk through my thoughts on whether or not to get a PhD, what areas to pursue, and why. After the conversation, I decided that I should probably only focus on one area, and I decided that AI technical safety was probably a better fit for me because of my background and experience. Even though I had chosen a single field, I still felt lost, as there are lots of subfields within AI technical safety and I didn't have extensive experience in any of them. To me, this indicated that the most important next step would be exploration. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any paid positions that would allow for this kind of investigative approach. Instead, I started looking for courses that would provide the same kind of value. EA's Opportunities Board and the 80,000 Hours Job Board were very helpful for this. I found courses like the AI Governance course from Blue Dot Impact and an AI Safety Sprint course run by the Center for AI Safety. I applied for these courses, and while I was waiting to hear back, I read Blue Dot Impact's AI Safety Fundamentals reading list. Once I knew I had gotten into these courses, I worked out something with my employer so that I could go back down to part-time while these courses were going on. During them, I focused on networking and really engaging with the material as much as possible. After completing the Sprint course and halfway through the AI Governance course, I felt like I was ready to start contributing to something, but I didn't know what to do. I joined Discords and monitored opportunities channels in various Slacks. Even though I applied to research with many organizations and individuals, I still wasn't having much traction. It was at this point that I started looking for ways that I could make my own opportunities, as opposed to looking for opportunities that were already out there. I think that in general, this worked very well for me, as relatively soon, I was able to get in touch with Dr. Darrell Wright, who I mentioned earlier, and we started working together. I also started working on the AI Safety Camp research proposal. That catches us up to the conversation I was having with Peter about this podcast. Since that conversation, I applied and got into the EAG Boston conference that's happening at the end of October, and I'll be volunteering at that conference as well. I'm hoping to be able to talk to a lot of people there and hopefully record some of the conversations with decent audio to share with you guys. Anyways, that's the end of this background portion, which gets to the end of episode 0. I hope you enjoyed it. This episode was more or less scripted, but I'm probably not going to make too many more episodes like this because that's not really the focus of the podcast. However, I did feel like I needed to have something that explained what I was doing. If you have any thoughts on what I should cover, how I should cover it, who I should talk to, or other advice in general on the podcast or my approaches, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm looking forward to sharing these projects with everyone.